Elena Fairwind felt the bonds snap before she understood what was happening. One moment, she stood in front of hundreds of wolves, her heart racing with joy, because she had just found her fated mate. The next moment, pain tore through her chest like a blade twisting inside her ribs. Alpha King Damian Cross, the most powerful wolf in the world, looked straight into her eyes and said the words that would end her old life forever. "I reject you as my mate." The hall went silent. Then it did not stay silent for long. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Somewhere near the back, a woman laughed, quickly covering her mouth when others turned to look. Elena stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. She had waited 18 years for this moment. She had dreamed of it since she was a small girl listening to her mother's stories about fated mates and true love. Now it was gone in the space of a single sentence. Damian did not look away from her, but there was no warmth in his gaze. Beside him, a young human woman named Claire stood with her fingers laced through his, her face pale with worry, though she tried to hide a small, satisfied smile. Elena's wolf howled inside her mind, a sound of raw grief that no one else could hear but that shook her entire body. "Do something," her wolf whispered. "Say something. Do not just stand here." But Elena could not speak. Her throat had closed up completely. She looked at her father, Aldrich Fairwind, who stood near the front row with the other pack elders. His face had gone gray. He was the beta of a smaller allied pack, and his daughter's rejection in front of the Alpha King's entire court was not just her humiliation. It was his as well, and the humiliation of everyone who carried the Fairwind name. "Elena," someone whispered from the crowd, though she could not tell if it was said with pity or mockery. Perhaps it was both. She forced her legs to move. She turned on her heel, ignoring the sea of eyes following her, and walked out of the grand hall, with her chin lifted as high as she could manage, even though her whole body wanted to collapse. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart, not here, not in front of the pack that had once celebrated her birth with 3 days of feasting. Once she reached the corridor outside, her strength left her all at once. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet, not where anyone could see. Through the thick oak doors, she could still hear the murmurs of the crowd inside, the excited whispers about what had just happened, about how the Alpha King had chosen a human woman over his own fated mate. It was almost unheard of. Wolves searched their whole lives for a mate bond, and to reject one, especially in public, was considered one of the greatest insults a wolf could give. Elena had done nothing wrong. She had simply existed, and it had cost her everything. A hand touched her shoulder gently, and she flinched, looking up to see her older brother, Callum, kneeling beside her. His face was tight with anger, his jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle twitching. "He had no right," Callum said quietly. His voice was low so it would not carry. "No right at all." "He is the Alpha King," Elena whispered. "He can do whatever he wants." "That does not make it right," Callum said. Elena wiped her eyes quickly before any tears could fall, and stood up, smoothing down the front of her pale blue dress, the one her mother had spent weeks sewing for this very night. It felt like a cruel joke now, wearing a dress made with such love and hope, only for the night to end in disaster. "I need to go home," she said. Callum walked with her through the side halls of the Blackthorn estate, away from the crowd, until they reached the courtyard where carriages waited to take pack members back to their territories. The night air was cold, and Elena wrapped her arms around herself as they waited for their family's carriage to be brought around. "It will be fine," Callum said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "People will forget. These things happen." Elena did not answer. She knew he was trying to comfort her, but she also knew he did not believe his own words. Rejections were rare, and public rejections in front of the entire Blackthorn court were even rarer. This was not something people would simply forget. The carriage ride home was silent. Elena stared out the window at the passing trees, her mind replaying the moment over and over, the way Damian's eyes had looked at her, cold and unfeeling, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience, standing between him and the woman he actually wanted. When they arrived at the Fairwind estate, her mother, Marian, was waiting at the door, her face already lined with worry. News, it seemed, traveled faster than carriages. "Oh, my darling girl," Marion said, pulling Elena into her arms the moment she stepped down. "I am so sorry." Elena let herself be held for a moment before pulling back. She did not want sympathy. She wanted to disappear, to rewind time, to never have attended the ceremony at all. "I want to go to my room," she said quietly. Her mother nodded, understanding, and let her go. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy with exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. When she reached her bedroom, she closed the door behind her, and finally let the tears fall, sinking onto her bed, and pressing her face into her pillow so no one would hear her cry. Her wolf paced restlessly inside her mind, wounded and confused. The mate bond, though rejected, still left a scar, a phantom ache where something precious had been ripped away before it ever had the chance to grow. Elena had heard that rejected wolves sometimes struggled for years to recover, that some never fully healed. She wondered which kind of wolf she would become. Downstairs, she could hear her parents speaking in hushed, urgent voices. She could not make out every word, but she heard enough. Word would spread quickly through the territories. Other packs would hear about the rejection before the sun rose. Alliances that her father had spent years building could weaken. Some packs might even see the Fairwind family as damaged, unworthy of respect, simply because their daughter had been cast aside by the Alpha King. Elena lay awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside her window. She thought about Damien's face, the way he had not even flinched when he said the words that shattered her world. She thought about Claire, the human Worcester woman he had chosen instead, and wondered what made her so special that a king would give up his fated mate for her. She thought, too, about her own wolf, and the strange feeling that had settled inside her chest since the rejection. It was not just grief. Underneath the pain, there was something else, something sharper and colder, like a blade being forged in fire. She could not name it yet, but she could feel it growing. By morning, Elena had not slept at all. She rose before dawn and dressed quietly, avoiding the mirror, because she did not want to see her own reflection, swollen eyes and all. When she went downstairs, she found her father sitting alone at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea in front of him, his expression distant and troubled. "Father," she said softly. Aldrich looked up, and for a moment, Elena saw something in his eyes that frightened her more than anything else that had happened the night before. It was fear. "Elena," he said carefully, "we need to talk about what happens next." She sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "What do you mean?" "Damien Cross is not a forgiving king," Aldrich said. "Even though he was the one who rejected you, there will be those who whisper that our family failed somehow, that we did not raise you properly, that something is wrong with you. It is unfair, but it is how these things work." Elena felt her stomach twist. "So this is my fault now?" "No," her father said quickly. "No, of course not. But perception matters more than truth in the world of packs. Other alphas may hesitate to align with us. Trade agreements could fall through. I have already received word that Alpha Reeve of the Eastern Territory is reconsidering our partnership." Elena stared at him, disbelief washing over her. "Because of me?" Aldrich reached across the table and took her hand. "Because of what happened, not because of who you are. You must understand the difference, even if others do not." She nodded slowly, though the ache in her chest only deepened. She had spent her whole life being told she was destined for something great, that being a fated mate to an Alpha King was the highest honor a wolf could receive. Now that same destiny had turned into a burden that threatened to crush everyone she loved. "I think," her father continued, his voice growing quieter, "it may be safer for you, and for this family, if you were to stay away for a while. Not forever, just until the talk dies down, until people find something new to gossip about." Elena's throat tightened. "You want me to leave?" "I want to protect you," Aldrich said, "and I want to protect your mother, and your brother, and everyone in this pack who depends on our alliances to survive. If you stay here, you will be a target for pity, or worse, for cruelty. There are wolves who enjoy watching others fall. I do not want you to be their entertainment." Elena sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing his words. Part of her wanted to argue, to insist that she had done nothing wrong and should not have to hide because of someone else's choice. But another part of her, the colder part that had been growing since the night before, Understood that her father was right. Staying would mean enduring endless whispers, pitying looks, and the slow erosion of her family's standing among the packs. Where would I go? She asked finally. Aldrich hesitated. I have a small amount of savings set aside, enough to get you started somewhere far from here, somewhere no one knows your face or your story. You could build a new life, Elena, away from all of this. Elena thought about the world beyond the borders of her home territory, the vast wilderness that stretched between the known packs, filled with neutral lands and rogue wolves who answered to no one. It was dangerous. It was uncertain. But for the first time since the rejection, she felt something other than despair. She felt the faintest flicker of possibility. I will go, she said quietly. Her father's shoulders sagged with relief and sorrow all at once. I am sorry it has come to this. Elena stood from the table, her decision made. Do not be sorry, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Damien Cross made his choice last night. Now I am making mine. That afternoon, she packed a single bag with clothes, a small amount of money her father gave her, and a photograph of her family taken years earlier, back when life had still felt simple. Her mother cried as she hugged her goodbye, whispering promises to write, and to always keep a place for her at their table. Callum walked her to the edge of the property, his face set in a hard, protective expression that reminded her so much of their father. If anyone gives you trouble out there, he said, you fight back. You do not let anyone treat you the way he did last night. Do you understand me? Elena managed a small, sad smile. I understand. As she walked away from the only home she had ever known, the sun beginning to set behind the distant hills, she allowed herself one final glance back. The estate looked smaller from this distance, less significant than it had always seemed growing up. Somewhere beyond those hills, Damien Cross was likely continuing his life, without a single thought for the wolf he had cast aside. Elena turned forward again, facing the unknown road ahead of her. Her wolf stirred inside her, no longer whimpering with grief but standing alert, watchful, ready. Whatever waited for her out there, in the wild lands beyond the borders of civilization, she would meet it head-on. She had been rejected once. She would not allow herself to be broken. Something new was awakening inside her, something she did not yet fully understand, but she could feel it growing stronger with every step she took away from the life that had cast her aside. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time since the ceremony, Elena felt something other than sorrow. She felt the beginning of change. The wildlands stretched endlessly in every direction, and Elena had never felt so small. 3 days had passed since she left her family's estate, and already her shoes were worn thin from walking, her stomach hollow with hunger she refused to complain about. She had grown up hearing stories about lone wolves who wandered these unclaimed territories, wolves without packs, without protection, forced to survive by their wits alone. She had never imagined she would become one of them. The first night, she had slept curled against the base of a large oak tree, too afraid to shift into her wolf form in case something dangerous found her while she was vulnerable. By the second night, exhaustion had won out over fear, and she allowed her wolf to take over, her senses sharpening as fur replaced skin. It had felt strange, running alone through unfamiliar forest with no pack around her, no howls answering her own. For the first time in her life, she understood true isolation. On the morning of the 4th day, Elena stopped at the edge of a wide river, to drink and to wash the dirt from her hands and face. Her reflection in the water looked different than she remembered. Her eyes seemed sharper somehow, more focused, and there was a hardness in her expression that had not been there before the rejection. She barely recognized the girl staring back at her. She had been thinking often about the strange sensation that had settled inside her chest since that terrible night. It was not simply grief anymore, though grief still lingered beneath everything else she felt. It was something more like pressure, like a held breath finally being released. Her wolf felt different too, faster, stronger, as though the breaking of the bond had cracked open something that had been sealed away. She had tested it once, 2 nights earlier, sprinting through the forest, just to see how fast she could run. She had always been a fast wolf, one of the quickest in her old pack's training exercises. But this was different. The trees blurred past her in streaks of shadow, and she reached the far side of a valley in what felt like half the time it should have taken. When she finally stopped, her heart pounding, she had stood there in stunned silence, wondering what exactly was happening to her. Continuing along the riverbank that morning, Elena kept her senses alert, listening for any signs of danger. Neutral territories were home to more than just lone wolves seeking solitude. Rogues, wolves who had been exiled from their packs for crimes or violence, also wandered these lands, and they were far more dangerous than ordinary loners. Her father had warned her about them before she left, his voice tight with worry, even as he insisted this was still the safest option available to her. "Trust your instincts," he had told her. "Your wolf will warn you before your mind does." She heard the twig snap before her mind fully processed the sound, but her wolf reacted instantly, her body going still, her ears swiveling toward the source. Someone was following her, keeping pace just beyond the tree line, moving carefully as though trying not to be noticed. Elena's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to keep walking at a steady pace, not wanting to reveal that she had noticed. She counted her steps, calculating the distance to the nearest thick cluster of trees, where she might have some cover if things turned dangerous. Whoever was following her was patient, staying just out of sight, watching. Elena's mind raced through her limited options. She was unmated, alone, and far from any pack that would come to her aid if she called for help. When the figure finally emerged from the tree line, Elena spun around, her body dropping instinctively into a defensive stance, every muscle coiled and ready. A lean, rough-looking man stood a short distance away, his clothes worn and patched, his eyes carrying the hollow, hungry look she had heard described in stories about rogues who had spent too long without the stability of a pack. "Well now," he said, his voice carrying a rasping quality that made Elena's skin crawl. "A pretty little thing, wandering all alone out here. Not very smart, is it?" "I am not looking for trouble," Elena said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear pulsing through her veins. The man smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp, too animal even for a wolf in human form. "Trouble has a way of finding pretty things anyway." Elena's wolf surged forward inside her mind, no longer whimpering with old grief, but snarling with something fierce and protective. She felt her body responding, before she consciously decided to act, her stance shifting, her senses sharpening to a degree she had never experienced before. The man took a step closer, clearly expecting her to flinch away. Instead, Elena held her ground. Something flickered across the rogue's face, a flash of uncertainty, as he seemed to sense that this was not the easy encounter he had anticipated. Elena felt a strange, cold clarity settle over her, the same feeling she had experienced when testing her speed through the forest days earlier. Whatever had changed inside her since the rejection, it was rising to the surface now, responding to the threat in front of her. "You should walk away," she said, her voice low and steady, carrying a weight she did not fully understand herself. The rogue hesitated, studying her more carefully now, as though reconsidering his assessment of the situation. Something about her stance, her expression, made him pause. Wolves who had spent years surviving in the wild developed a sharp instinct for danger, and apparently, whatever instinct guided this man, was warning him that Elena was not the easy target he had assumed. After a long, tense moment, he took a step back, his hands raised slightly, in a gesture of retreat. "Not worth the trouble," he muttered, more to himself than to her, before turning and disappearing back into the trees. Elena remained frozen in place for several minutes after he vanished, her heart hammering against her ribs, adrenaline still coursing through her system. When she finally allowed herself to relax, her legs nearly gave out beneath her, and she sank down onto a nearby rock, taking deep, steadying breaths. "What was that?" she whispered to herself, both amazed and unsettled by what had just happened. She had faced down a dangerous rogue wolf without shifting, without fighting, simply by holding her ground and letting something unfamiliar rise within her. It had worked, but she did not fully understand why, or what exactly that something was. Over the following days, Elena continued her journey deeper into the wild territories, moving with more confidence than before, though she remained cautious. She began paying closer attention to the changes happening within her, testing small things when she felt safe enough to do so. Her hearing had sharpened considerably, allowing her to detect sounds from much greater distances than she remembered being able to before. Her sense of smell had similarly intensified, letting her identify nearby water sources, edible plants, and potential dangers long before she would have noticed them previously. She wondered if this was simply how rejected wolves adapted, their bodies compensating for the emotional wound with heightened physical abilities, a survival mechanism built into their very nature. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, something connected to whatever bloodline ran through her veins that she had never been told about. Her mother had always been somewhat mysterious about her own family history, deflecting questions about her parents and grandparents with vague, gentle answers that never quite satisfied Elena's curiosity as a child. She wondered now, walking alone through unclaimed wilderness, if there was more to that mystery than she had ever realized. As the sun began to set on her 7th day of travel, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Elena found herself standing at the edge of a dense, ancient forest, unlike anything she had encountered so far on her journey. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than she could wrap her arms around, their canopies so thick that very little sunlight reached the forest floor, even at midday. Something about this place felt different, charged with an energy she could not quite name. Her wolf grew restless and alert, pacing anxiously inside her mind, torn between caution and an inexplicable pull toward the shadowed depths of the ancient woods. Elena hesitated at the tree line, weighing her options. She could make camp here at the edge, safely away from whatever lay within, or she could push forward into the unknown, following the strange, insistent feeling drawing her deeper into the forest. Every practical instinct told her to stay cautious, to avoid unnecessary risks in unfamiliar territory. But there was something else pulling at her, quieter than instinct but somehow more insistent, whispering that whatever waited within those ancient trees might hold answers to the questions that had been building inside her since the night of her rejection. Answers about the strange power growing within her. Answers about who she truly was, beneath the identity she had lost when Damien Cross spoke those devastating words in front of his entire court. Taking a deep breath, Elena stepped forward into the shadows of the ancient forest, leaving the familiar world behind her completely. Branches cracked beneath Elena's feet as she moved deeper into the ancient forest, the canopy above swallowing what little light remained from the setting sun. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, and the air itself felt heavier here, thick with an energy that made the fur on her arms rise, even though she remained in her human form. She had walked for what felt like an hour, though time seemed strangely distorted beneath the massive, ancient trees. A low growl rumbled from somewhere close by, and Elena froze instantly, every muscle tensing. She had not sensed anything approaching, which frightened her more than the sound itself. Whatever was nearby had moved with a stealth that even her heightened senses had failed to detect. 3 shapes emerged from the darkness surrounding her, rogue wolves in their shifted forms, their eyes glowing with hunger in the dim light. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs as she realized she was surrounded, cut off from any easy retreat. These were not like the single rogue she had faced days earlier. These wolves moved with coordinated purpose, clearly used to hunting together. She backed against the trunk of a massive tree, her mind racing through her limited options. Shifting would take precious seconds she might not have. Running would mean turning her back on at least one of the approaching wolves. Fighting 3 experienced rogues alone, without a pack to support her, seemed almost certainly a losing battle. The largest of the 3 wolves lunged first, and Elena barely managed to dodge to the side, feeling the rush of air as sharp teeth snapped shut just inches from where she had been standing. She shifted instantly then, fur rushing across her skin, bones reshaping themselves with a speed that still felt unfamiliar even after years of practice. As a wolf, she was faster, stronger, more capable of defending herself, but she was still badly outnumbered. The second wolf came at her from the side, and Elena spun to meet the attack, her teeth finding purchase in the thick fur along its shoulder before it could close the distance completely. The wolf yelped and retreated, but the third was already circling behind her, cutting off her escape route toward the tree line. Elena's wolf howled inside her mind, not with fear now but with something fiercer, something that seemed to answer the growing pressure in her chest. She felt the same cold, sharp clarity she had experienced during her encounter with the lone rogue days earlier, but stronger this time, more focused. Her muscles seemed to move with greater precision, her senses sharpening to a level that bordered on overwhelming. The largest wolf lunged again, and this time Elena did not simply dodge. She met the attack head-on, her strength surprising even herself as she managed to hold her ground against an opponent that should have easily overpowered her. The rogue stumbled backward, clearly shocked by the resistance it had encountered from what it had assumed would be an easy target. A sharp whistle cut through the tension of the clearing, and all three rogue wolves froze instantly, their ears flattening in what looked distinctly like fear. Elena, still tense and ready to fight, glanced toward the source of the sound and saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by shadow. "Enough," a deep voice commanded, carrying an authority that made even Elena's own instincts want to obey, despite not knowing who this stranger was. The three rogue wolves retreated immediately, disappearing back into the darkness of the forest without a single sound of protest. Elena remained in her wolf form, breathing hard, watching as the figure stepped forward into a patch of moonlight filtering down through a gap in the ancient canopy. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp, assessing eyes that studied her with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight through to whatever strange power had been growing inside her. His presence carried a weight similar to what she remembered feeling around Damien Cross, the unmistakable aura of someone accustomed to command, someone who ruled rather than simply led. Elena shifted back into her human form cautiously, keeping a defensive distance between herself and this stranger, despite the fact that he had just saved her from what could have been a fatal encounter. "Thank you," she said carefully, though her wolf remained alert, uncertain whether this new development represented safety or a different kind of danger entirely. The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. "You held your own against three rogues," he observed, his voice thoughtful rather than surprised. "That is unusual for a lone wolf traveling without a pack." "I did what I had to," Elena replied simply. He stepped closer, and Elena noticed the way his eyes flickered briefly, almost as though he was sensing something about her that went beyond ordinary observation. "There is something different about you," he said, more to himself than to her. "Something I have not encountered before." Elena's guard remained firmly in place. "And who exactly are you?" "Kane," he said simply, offering no further explanation about his surname or his position, though everything about his bearing suggested he held significant power within these territories. "This forest belongs to me, or what remains of my claim to it. Very few wolves wander this deep without invitation, and fewer still survive an encounter with rogues who answer to no pack law." Elena studied him carefully, weighing whether to trust this stranger who had appeared so conveniently at the exact moment she needed rescue. "I did not ask for help," she said, though there was no real hostility in her tone, only caution. Kane's mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "No, you did not. But you would likely be dead without it, regardless of how well you fought." The blunt honesty of his words struck Elena harder than she expected, and she found herself unable to argue against the truth of what he was saying. She had fought well, better than she had ever fought before, but three trained rogues against one lone wolf would have eventually overwhelmed her, power or no power. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Kane considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Curiosity, mostly," he admitted. "I have not sensed strength like yours in a very long time, not from any wolf traveling through these lands. I wanted to see what you would do when tested." Elena felt a flicker of unease at being treated like some kind of experiment, but beneath that unease, curiosity of her own began to stir. This man clearly knew things she did not, understood something about the changes happening within her that even she could not fully explain. "What do you mean, strength like mine?" she asked. Kane's expression grew more serious, and he glanced around the darkened forest as though checking for any listening ears before answering. "That is not a conversation to have standing in the open, exposed to whatever else might be watching from the shadows," he said. "If you wish to understand what is happening to you, you are welcome to follow me. My camp is not far from here, and it is far safer than remaining in open forest after dark." Elena hesitated, every instinct honed by years of caution warning her against following a strange man deeper into unfamiliar territory. But something about his manner, the careful way he spoke, the restraint he had shown even while clearly possessing significant power, made her reconsider her usual caution. She thought about her journey so far, the loneliness of traveling without any guidance, the frightening uncertainty of not understanding the changes happening within her own body and wolf. If this stranger truly knew something about what she was experiencing, the risk of following him might be worth the potential answers waiting on the other side. "Lead the way," she said finally, though she kept her senses alert, ready to defend herself again, if this decision turned out to be a mistake. Cain nodded once, apparently satisfied with her answer, and turned to lead her deeper into the ancient forest. As they walked in silence beneath the towering trees, Elena found herself studying this mysterious wolf, who moved with such quiet confidence, through territory that had nearly claimed her life just minutes earlier. She did not yet know that this chance encounter, born from danger and curiosity, would change the entire course of her future. They walked for perhaps 20 minutes, before the trees began to thin slightly, revealing a hidden clearing, where a modest but well-organized camp had been established. A fire burned low in a stone circle at the center, and several simple structures built from wood and stone stood arranged around the perimeter, clearly the work of someone who had spent considerable time establishing this refuge deep within the forest. Elena took in the sight with growing curiosity. This was no ordinary rogue's hideout. Everything about the camp suggested careful planning, discipline, and purpose. Cain gestured toward the fire. "Sit," he said. "I will explain what I can, though I suspect there is much even I do not fully understand about what is happening to you." Elena settled near the fire, grateful for its warmth after days spent in the cold wilderness. As Cain took a seat across from her, his expression grew thoughtful, almost cautious, as though he was carefully choosing how much to reveal. "Tell me first," he said, "what happened to you before you came to these lands? Something significant occurred, something that awakened whatever power I sensed in you tonight. I need to understand the cause before I can help you understand the effect." Elena hesitated, the memory of her rejection still raw despite the days that had passed since that terrible night. But something in Cain's steady, patient gaze convinced her that honesty was the right choice, that whatever answers she sought would only come through complete truth. Slowly, she began to tell him everything. Cain listened without interruption, as Elena recounted the events of her rejection, her voice growing steadier the longer she spoke, as though releasing the story into the open air lightened some of the weight she had carried alone for the past week. When she finally finished, describing her long journey through the wilderness and the strange sensations that had been building inside her ever since, Cain sat in thoughtful silence for several long moments, the firelight flickering across his sharp features. "A public rejection from an alpha king," he said finally, shaking his head slowly. "That explains a great deal, though perhaps not in the way you might expect." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, leaning forward slightly. Cain picked up a small stick and stirred the fire absently before speaking again. "When a fated bond forms between two wolves, it does not simply create a connection between them. It also unlocks certain dormant potential within each wolf, potential that exists but remains sealed away until the bond either strengthens through acceptance or breaks through rejection. Most wolves experience only mild changes when a bond forms normally, subtle increases in strength or awareness as the bond settles. But when a bond is violently severed," he continued, "especially through public rejection, something different can occur. The energy that would have flowed steadily into the growing bond instead floods back into the rejected wolf all at once, like a dam breaking. For most wolves, this simply causes pain and temporary weakness as their body struggles to process the sudden reversal." Elena frowned, trying to follow his explanation. "But that is not what happened to me." "No," Cain agreed, his eyes studying her with renewed intensity. "It seems your body did not simply struggle to process that reversal. It absorbed it, transformed it into something else entirely. This is exceptionally rare, something I have only heard described in old stories passed down through generations, never something I expected to witness firsthand." "What kind of stories?" Elena asked, her curiosity overriding her earlier caution. Cain's expression grew distant, as though recalling memories from long ago. "There are old bloodlines," he said slowly, "ancient lines of wolves, who descended from the very first Lunas, back when the world was younger and packs were still finding their place in it. These bloodlines carried unusual gifts, abilities beyond ordinary wolf strength and speed. Over centuries, as bloodlines mixed and dispersed across countless packs, these gifts became diluted, rare, often disappearing entirely for generations before resurfacing unexpectedly in a single descendant." Elena felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Are you saying I might carry one of these bloodlines?" "It would explain what I sensed in you tonight," Cain said, "and what you experienced yourself, this growing strength, this heightened awareness. A rejection alone would not typically produce such significant changes, unless there was already dormant potential waiting to be unlocked. Elena sat back, absorbing this information slowly. She thought about her mother's vague, evasive answers whenever questions arose about her extended family history. The way certain conversations always seemed to shift subtly whenever her grandmother's name came up. She had always assumed it was simply personal sensitivity, perhaps some old family tragedy her mother preferred not to discuss. Now she wondered if there was something far more significant hidden within her family's past. "My mother never spoke much about her side of the family," Elena admitted. "I never thought much of it before, but now I wonder if she knew something she never told me." "It would not be unusual for such knowledge to be kept quiet," Kane said. "Bloodlines like these, when discovered by the wrong wolves, have historically led to danger for the families who carry them. Powerful alphas throughout history have sought to control or claim wolves with rare gifts, either through forced alliances or, in darker times, through more troubling means. Your mother may have kept silent to protect you." Elena felt a complicated mixture of emotions swirling within her. Wonder at the possibility of discovering something extraordinary about her heritage, mixed with a lingering hurt that her own mother might have kept such significant information hidden from her throughout her entire life. "If this is true," she said slowly, "what does it mean for me now? What am I supposed to do with whatever this power is?" Kane considered her question carefully before responding. "That depends entirely on you," he said. "Power without direction or training is often more dangerous than no power at all. If what I suspect is true, you have only begun to scratch the surface of what you are capable of, and without proper guidance, that potential could either wither away unused or, worse, spiral beyond your control in ways that could harm you or those around you." Elena studied him closely, considering the weight of his words. "Are you offering to train me?" A faint smile touched Kane's mouth, the first genuine expression of warmth she had seen from him since their encounter began. "I am offering the opportunity," he said. "Whether you choose to accept it remains entirely up to you. I will not force anything upon you that you do not willingly choose for yourself." Elena thought about her situation carefully, weighing the uncertainty of continuing her aimless journey through dangerous wilderness against the possibility of finally understanding the strange changes occurring within her own body and wolf. She thought about her family back home, the alliances threatened by her rejection, the whispers that were surely still spreading through pack territories even now. If there was truly something significant awakening inside her, something connected to a powerful ancient bloodline, perhaps understanding and mastering that power could offer her more than simple survival. Perhaps it could offer her a path toward reclaiming some measure of the dignity and strength that had been stripped from her the moment Damian Cross spoke those devastating words in front of his entire court. "I accept," she said finally, meeting Kane's gaze steadily. "Teach me what you know." Kane nodded slowly, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Then we begin tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, you should rest. Whatever training lies ahead will not be easy, and you will need your strength." As Elena settled near the fire that night, wrapped in a warm blanket Kane had provided from his modest supplies, she found herself thinking not about the pain of her rejection, but about the uncertain, fascinating path now opening before her. For the first time since that terrible night in the Blackthorn Hall, she felt something resembling genuine hope beginning to take root within her chest, fragile but unmistakably present. She fell asleep to the sound of the fire crackling softly, and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures moving through the ancient forest, her wolf finally settling into a calmer state than it had experienced since the moment the mate bond had shattered inside her. Tomorrow, a new chapter of her life would begin. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of Kane moving quietly around the camp, already preparing for the day ahead. She sat up, stretching muscles still sore from her encounter with the rogue wolves the night before, and watched him work for a moment, before rising to join him near the fire. "You are awake earlier than I expected," Kane observed, glancing over at her. "I did not want to keep you waiting," Elena replied, accepting a piece of dried meat he offered her for breakfast. "Good," he said. "Training begins with discipline, and discipline begins with respecting time. We will not always have the luxury of waiting for anyone to catch up, in training or in life beyond it." After they finished their simple meal, Kane led her to a wide clearing a short distance from the main camp, one clearly used for training purposes, based on the marks and wear visible across the ground. He turned to face her, his expression serious and focused. Before we begin any physical training, he said, I need to understand the full extent of what you are currently capable of. Show me your speed first. Run to that tree and back, as fast as you are able. Elena nodded and shifted into her wolf form, feeling the familiar rush of transformation, before launching herself across the clearing at full speed. She reached the designated tree and returned to Kane's position, in what felt like mere seconds, her heart pounding from the exertion, but her mind already anticipating his assessment. Kane's eyebrows rose slightly as he watched her complete the exercise. Impressive, he admitted. Faster than most trained warriors I have encountered, and this is likely only a fraction of your true potential, given that you have received no formal guidance in developing these abilities. Over the following days, Kane pushed Elena through increasingly demanding physical exercises, testing not just her speed, but her strength, endurance, and reflexes. Each test revealed new levels of capability that continued to surprise them both. Elena found herself able to leap distances that should have been impossible, to sustain physical exertion far longer than she ever had during her training within her old pack, to react to sudden threats with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. But physical strength alone was not the only focus of Kane's teaching. As the days progressed into weeks, he began introducing her to more subtle aspects of the power awakening within her, aspects that went beyond simple physical enhancement. There is more to what you carry than mere strength and speed, Kane explained one evening, as they sat near the fire, following a particularly grueling day of training. Ancient bloodlines like the one I believe flows through you often carry gifts related to influence and presence, abilities that extend beyond the physical realm entirely. What kind of abilities? Elena asked, intrigued despite the exhaustion weighing heavily on her body. Kane considered how best to explain the concept. Have you noticed, he said slowly, how certain wolves seem to command attention and respect simply by entering a room, regardless of their actual physical strength? This is often described as presence or authority, and while most alphas develop some degree of this quality through leadership experience, those from powerful bloodlines are often born with an innate, amplified version of this ability. Elena thought back to the encounter with the lone rogue wolf during her early journey through the wilderness, the way he had hesitated and eventually retreated despite clearly outmatching her in raw combat experience. She had assumed at the time that her fighting stance alone had convinced him to back away, but perhaps something deeper had been at work. I think I may have already experienced something like that, she said, describing the encounter to Kane in detail. He nodded thoughtfully as she spoke. That certainly sounds consistent with what I am describing, he confirmed. This ability, sometimes referred to in old stories as the voice of command, allows certain wolves to influence the instincts and behaviors of others around them, particularly other wolves. It is not mind control, nothing so crude or absolute, but rather a subtle pressure that can encourage caution, respect, or even obedience in those who encounter it. Elena felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension at this revelation. Such power sounded remarkable, but also carried obvious risks if misused or poorly controlled. How do I learn to use this deliberately, rather than relying on instinct alone? She asked. Kane's expression grew more serious. That will require considerable practice and discipline, he said. Unlike physical strength, which can be honed through repetition and exertion, abilities like this require careful mental control and emotional regulation. We will begin working on this tomorrow, but I must warn you that progress will likely be slower and more frustrating than what you have experienced with physical training so far. True to his warning, Elena found the following weeks of training far more challenging than the physical exercises that had preceded them. Kane taught her meditation techniques designed to help her recognize and control the subtle shifts in energy that accompanied her emerging abilities. He introduced controlled scenarios where she practiced projecting calm authority, gradually learning to summon that same commanding presence she had unconsciously displayed during her encounter with the rogue wolf. Progress came slowly at first, marked by frequent failures and moments of frustration that tested Elena's patience severely. But gradually, with Kane's patient guidance, she began to develop genuine control over these emerging gifts, learning to summon her presence deliberately, rather than relying solely on instinctive reactions during moments of danger. Alongside these lessons in her developing abilities, Kane also began teaching her practical combat skills, techniques for fighting effectively both in human form and as a wolf, strategies for facing multiple opponents, methods for reading an enemy's movements and anticipating their attacks before they occurred. Elena absorbed this knowledge eagerly, driven by a determination that had been steadily building within her since the night of her rejection. She would not be caught helpless again, not by rogue wolves in the wilderness, and certainly not by anyone who might seek to use her past humiliation against her in the future. As the weeks passed, Elena's body and abilities transformed dramatically under Kane's careful guidance. She moved with newfound confidence and grace, her senses sharper, her strength more refined and controlled, her understanding of her own emerging gifts growing steadily more sophisticated. The frightened, heartbroken wolf who had fled her home territory weeks earlier felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone stronger, more capable, more certain of her own worth. One evening, as they finished a particularly successful training session, Kane studied her with an expression of genuine respect that had not been present during their earlier encounters. "You have made remarkable progress," he said, "far more quickly than I anticipated when we began this training. Whatever bloodline flows through you, it responds to discipline and effort in ways I have rarely witnessed." Elena felt a warm sense of pride at his acknowledgement, though she remained aware that her training was far from complete. "There is still so much I do not understand," she admitted, "about this power, about where it truly comes from, about what it might mean for my future." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "Understanding will come with time and continued practice," he said, "but I believe you are ready now for something beyond simply training in isolation. There are wolves scattered throughout these wild territories, exiles and outcasts who have been cast out from their packs for various reasons, much as circumstances forced you from your own home. Some of them possess genuine skill and potential, wasted because no pack will accept them." "What are you suggesting?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already understood the direction of his thoughts. Kane's expression grew more purposeful. "I am suggesting that perhaps it is time to begin building something new," he said. "A pack founded not on old prejudices or rigid traditions, but on genuine strength and loyalty. Wolves who have been rejected by others, much as you were rejected, deserve a place to belong, and I believe, together, we might be capable of providing exactly that." Elena considered his words carefully, feeling something shift within her chest, a sense of purpose beginning to take shape from the wreckage of her old life. The idea of building something entirely new, of creating a place of belonging for wolves who had been discarded by the world, just as she had been, resonated deeply with everything she had experienced over the past several weeks. "I would like that," she said finally, meeting Kane's gaze with newfound determination. "I would like that very much." News of a powerful, unclaimed she-wolf training in the wild territories began spreading slowly at first, carried through whispered conversations among rogue wolves and outcasts who had no pack to call their own. Kane had contacts scattered throughout the neutral lands, wolves who owed him favors from past encounters, and he began reaching out carefully, inviting those who might be interested in joining a new kind of pack, one built on different principles than the rigid hierarchies most had known before. The first to arrive was a young wolf named Miles, barely 20 years old, who had been cast out of his birth pack after a hunting accident left another wolf injured, an accident that had not truly been his fault, but had been used as convenient justification by an alpha, eager to remove a wolf who challenged his authority too openly. Miles arrived at the camp cautious and defensive, clearly expecting rejection or exploitation, and it took considerable patience from both Elena and Kane to convince him that this offer of belonging was genuine. Following Miles came others, each with their own story of exile and rejection. There was Dara, a fierce fighter whose only crime had been refusing an arranged mating that her pack elders had demanded. There was an older wolf named Griffin, exiled decades earlier for reasons he rarely spoke about openly, though his skill in strategy and leadership became evident almost immediately. Slowly, gradually, a small but growing community began forming within the ancient forest, drawn together by shared experiences of rejection and a desperate hope for something better. Elena found herself naturally drawn into a leadership role within this developing group, her own experience with rejection giving her genuine empathy for the wolves arriving with similar wounds. She listened patiently to their stories, offered guidance drawn from her own training with Kane, and gradually began to understand that her strange, powerful gifts extended beyond simple physical combat or commanding presence. She discovered an ability to sense emotional distress in those around her, a subtle awareness that allowed her to recognize when a newly arrived wolf was struggling silently with grief or fear they had not yet voiced aloud. This sensitivity, combined with her growing confidence and strength, made her a natural source of comfort and stability for the community forming around her and Kane. "You have a gift for this," Kane observed one evening, as they watched several of the newer arrivals working together to reinforce one of the camp's simple structures, laughing together, despite the difficult circumstances that had brought them all to this remote forest. Leadership is not simply about strength or command. It is about understanding what others need and providing it, even before they realize they need it themselves. Elena watched the small community continuing their work, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical training and everything to do with genuine connection. "I never expected to find this," she admitted quietly, "not after everything that happened." "Sometimes the most painful beginnings lead to the most meaningful outcomes," Kane replied, his voice carrying a thoughtful quality that suggested he was speaking from personal experience as much as observation. As their community continued growing over the following weeks, practical challenges emerged that required careful planning and organization. Feeding a growing number of wolves demanded more systematic hunting and gathering strategies than had been necessary when the camp housed only Kane and, later, Elena alone. Shelter needed expanding to accommodate new arrivals comfortably as autumn temperatures began dropping toward winter's approach. Elena threw herself into these organizational challenges with the same determination she had brought to her physical and mental training, drawing on skills she had absorbed during her childhood, watching her father manage the practical affairs of their family's smaller pack territory. She organized hunting parties with careful attention to each wolf's individual strengths, coordinated construction projects that made efficient use of available materials, and gradually helped transform their loose gathering of exiles into something resembling genuine pack structure. Griffin, the older wolf whose strategic mind had become increasingly evident, approached Elena one afternoon as she reviewed plans for expanding their shelter capacity before winter fully arrived. "You lead well," he said, his weathered face showing genuine respect. "Better than many alphas I served under during my years with my old pack, if I am being entirely honest." Elena felt genuine surprise at his compliment, given his considerably longer experience with pack dynamics and leadership. "I am simply doing what feels necessary," she replied modestly. "That is precisely what good leadership looks like," Griffin said. "Not power seized for its own sake, but responsibility accepted because it is needed, and because you care enough about those around you to shoulder that burden willingly." His words settled into Elena's mind, and she found herself reflecting on how dramatically her circumstances had changed since the devastating night of her rejection. She had arrived in these wild territories, broken and humiliated, uncertain whether she would even survive the journey through dangerous, unclaimed lands. Now, weeks later, she found herself at the center of something genuinely meaningful, a community built from shared pain, but growing into something resembling hope and purpose. As winter approached and their small community continued expanding, word of their growing settlement inevitably began reaching beyond the immediate wilderness, carried by traveling merchants and wandering wolves, who passed through neutral territories on their way between established packlands. Some who heard these stories dismissed them as exaggeration, tales of a mysterious pack forming in forgotten forest territory, led by an unnamed lone alpha and a she-wolf possessing unusual strength. Others, however, particularly wolves who had experienced their own rejections or exiles from established packs, began seeking out this rumored settlement themselves, drawn by the possibility of finding belonging where their own pack structures had failed them. Their numbers grew steadily throughout the winter months, from a handful of initial arrivals to nearly 24 wolves, calling the ancient forest camp their home, by the time spring began returning warmth to the wild territories. Elena stood one morning near the edge of their expanding settlement, watching several wolves working together to construct additional shelter for the continued growth they anticipated, as warmer weather made travel easier for those still seeking a place to belong. Kane approached and stood beside her, his expression thoughtful as he observed the same scene. "We have built something real here," he said quietly. Elena nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deeply within her chest. "We have," she agreed, "though I wonder sometimes what comes next. We cannot remain hidden forever, especially as our numbers continue growing." Kane's expression grew more serious. No, he agreed. Eventually, we will need to establish formal recognition as a legitimate pack, with defined territory and official standing among the other packs of these lands. That step will not be simple, nor without risk. Elena considered his words carefully, understanding the significant challenges that formal recognition would involve. Established packs rarely welcomed new competitors for territory and resources without resistance, and the wolves who had gathered here, though loyal and increasingly skilled under continued training, remained far fewer in number than many of the older, more established packs scattered throughout the known territories. Whatever challenges lie ahead, she said finally, we will face them together. This community deserves the chance to become something lasting, something real. Kane turned to look at her directly, something unreadable flickering across his expression before he spoke again. Agreed, he said simply, though the weight in his voice suggested there was more he wished to say, thoughts he was not yet ready to share openly. As spring fully arrived, transforming the ancient forest with fresh green growth and warmer temperatures, Elena found herself increasingly aware of a subtle shift occurring in her relationship with Kane, something beyond simple mentorship or shared leadership responsibility. She noticed herself seeking his company more frequently than strictly necessary, valuing his opinion and presence in ways that went beyond practical partnership. She did not yet understand what this growing connection truly meant, but she could feel something building steadily beneath the surface of their working relationship, something that reminded her, with both excitement and lingering caution, of feelings she had once believed destroyed forever on the night of her devastating rejection. The attack came without warning, on a warm afternoon in early summer, nearly a year after Elena had first arrived in the wild territories. A group of hostile rogues, larger and better organized than any threat they had faced before, descended upon the edges of their settlement, apparently drawn by rumors of the growing community and the resources it had accumulated over months of careful development. Elena was training with Dara near the eastern edge of the camp when the first warning howl sounded, carrying urgent alarm through the surrounding forest. She dropped her practice stance immediately, every instinct sharpening as she registered the sound of approaching danger. Attack, Dara said unnecessarily, already shifting into her wolf form. Elena shifted alongside her, and together they raced toward the source of the alarm, finding chaos erupting near the northern perimeter of their camp. At least 15 rogue wolves had breached their outer boundaries, moving with coordinated aggression that suggested deliberate planning rather than opportunistic raiding. Kane was already engaged near the center of the conflict, fighting alongside Griffin and several other experienced members of their community, but they were badly outnumbered, and Elena could see exhaustion beginning to show in their movements as the fight continued without clear resolution. Something shifted within Elena as she assessed the danger threatening the community she had helped build from nothing. This was not simply about her own survival anymore. These wolves around her, wolves who had trusted her leadership, who had found belonging within a settlement she had helped create, were counting on her now more than ever before. She felt the familiar cold clarity rising within her, but stronger than she had ever experienced it, amplified by genuine desperation and protective determination. Without conscious thought, she let that power surge outward, projecting authority and commanding presence with an intensity that surprised even herself. "Stop," she commanded, her voice carrying an unmistakable weight that seemed to reach every wolf within the chaotic clearing, friend and enemy alike. Remarkably, several of the attacking rogues hesitated, their aggressive momentum faltering, as something in Elena's projected authority triggered deep instinctive caution within them. This brief pause gave Kane and the other defenders precious moments to regroup, to coordinate their defense more effectively against the remaining attackers who had not been affected by Elena's commanding presence. Elena threw herself into the fight then, her enhanced speed and strength allowing her to move through the chaos with devastating effectiveness, defending her fellow pack members while carefully avoiding lethal force whenever possible, preferring instead to disable and repel attackers rather than kill them outright. This restraint, even in the heat of desperate combat, reflected values she had developed throughout her months of training and community building, a belief that violence should be minimized whenever alternatives existed. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, until the attacking rogues, having lost several of their number to injury and finding their coordinated assault crumbling under the community's fierce, unified defense, finally began retreating back into the surrounding forest, apparently deciding that whatever resources they had hoped to claim were not worth the cost of continuing their assault. As the immediate danger passed, Elena moved quickly through the camp, checking on her fellow pack members, relieved to find that while several had sustained injuries, none had been killed during the sudden, violent confrontation. Kane approached her as the chaos settled, his expression a complex mixture of relief and something else, something that looked remarkably like awe. "That commanding presence," he said, breathing hard from the exertion of battle. "I have never witnessed anything like it, not even in old stories describing wolves from powerful ancient bloodlines." Elena felt suddenly aware of just how significantly her abilities had grown since their initial training sessions began nearly a year earlier. "I did not plan that," she admitted. "It simply happened, driven by the need to protect everyone here." "Perhaps that is precisely how such abilities are meant to work," Kane suggested thoughtfully. "Not through calculated control alone, but through genuine emotional connection to what you are protecting." In the aftermath of the attack, their community came together with renewed determination, recognizing clearly now that their growing presence in these wild territories had attracted attention, both from wolves seeking genuine belonging and from those hoping to exploit or destroy what they had built. This realization prompted serious discussions about the need for formal recognition and stronger territorial defenses. Over the following weeks, Kane and Elena, working alongside Griffin's strategic guidance, began the careful process of formally establishing their community as a legitimate pack within the broader hierarchy of known territories. They chose a name that reflected both their origins and their aspirations, the Iron Fang Pack, symbolizing strength forged through hardship and unity, built from individuals who refused to be broken by their past rejections. Formal recognition required careful diplomatic outreach to neighboring pack territories, establishing clear boundaries and demonstrating both military capability and genuine stability that would discourage future opportunistic attacks. Kane's natural leadership abilities, combined with Elena's growing reputation for both strength and fairness, proved invaluable during these delicate negotiations. Word spread more rapidly now that Iron Fang carried official pack status, attracting additional wolves seeking belonging, along with growing curiosity and, in some cases, concern from more established territories who had never encountered a pack forming so rapidly from outcasts and exiles previously dismissed as insignificant. Elena found herself increasingly recognized not simply as Kane's partner in leadership, but as a formidable force in her own right, respected and, in some cases, feared by wolves who heard stories of her commanding presence during the battle that had helped save their community from destruction. She embraced this growing reputation carefully, mindful of Griffin's early lesson about leadership representing responsibility rather than power sought for its own sake. As Iron Fang's first official autumn approached, marking over a year since Elena's devastating rejection had first set her on this unexpected path, she found herself reflecting on how completely her life had transformed. The heartbroken, humiliated wolf who had fled her family's estate in shame felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone who had discovered genuine strength, purpose, and belonging within a community built entirely from shared resilience against rejection and hardship. One evening, as she and Kane reviewed plans for further expanding Iron Fang's territory and defenses, she found herself studying him thoughtfully, aware once again of the deepening connection that had been building steadily between them throughout their months of shared leadership and mutual respect. "We have come far," she said quietly, watching the fire crackle between them. Kane met her gaze, something warm and unmistakable flickering in his dark eyes. "We have," he agreed, "though I suspect, Elena, that our journey together is only truly beginning." Something in his tone, in the careful weight he placed on her name, sent a wave of warmth through her chest that felt entirely different from anything she had experienced before, warmer and more genuine than anything she had briefly believed she felt toward Damian Cross, before his devastating rejection had shattered that illusion completely. She did not yet know exactly what Kane meant by those words, but she found herself hoping, with a cautious optimism she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time, that whatever came next would bring them even closer together than the shared purpose that had already bound them so tightly throughout the past challenging, transformative year. The bond announced itself without warning, striking Elena with a force that nearly brought her to her knees during an ordinary evening spent reviewing territorial maps with Kane inside the modest wooden structure that had become their shared planning space. One moment they were discussing boundary markers along Iron Fang's eastern border, and the next, a warmth unlike anything she had ever experienced flooded through her entire body, radiating outward from her chest with an intensity that left her breathless. Kane froze mid-sentence, his own expression shifting rapidly from focused concentration to stunned recognition. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying a rough edge she had never heard from him before. "You feel it too," she said, though it was not truly a question. The certainty in her own voice surprised her. Kane nodded slowly, setting aside the map he had been holding, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I have felt something building between us for months," he admitted. "But I did not expect this, not so suddenly, not without warning." Elena understood his hesitation completely, her own mind racing to process the sensation flooding through her, so different from the brief, fragile connection she had felt with Damien during the moments before his devastating rejection. This bond felt steadier somehow, deeper, rooted in months of genuine partnership, shared struggle, and mutual respect, rather than the instant, unexplored recognition she had experienced with Damien. "Is this truly a fated bond?" she asked carefully. "Or something else, something built simply from our time spent working together?" Kane considered her question seriously before responding. "I believe it is a true bond," he said. "Fated connections do not always announce themselves immediately upon first meeting. Sometimes, particularly among wolves who carry unusual bloodlines or unique circumstances, the bond develops gradually, strengthening through genuine connection, before finally revealing itself fully, once both wolves are ready to recognize and accept it." Elena felt her heart racing at his explanation, memories of her devastating rejection surfacing unexpectedly alongside this new, overwhelming sensation of connection. A fragment of fear flickered through her, the lingering wound from having once offered her heart to a bond, only to have it violently rejected in front of hundreds of witnessing wolves. Kane seemed to sense her hesitation, his expression softening with understanding. "I will not reject this bond, Elena," he said firmly, his voice carrying quiet, unmistakable sincerity. "I have watched you build something remarkable from the ashes of your past pain. I have witnessed your strength, your compassion, your unwavering commitment to protecting those who found refuge within our community. Whatever fear lingers from your past experience, know that I accept this bond completely, without hesitation or reservation." Tears gathered in Elena's eyes, though these were tears of relief and overwhelming emotion rather than the grief that had defined her tears during the years since her rejection. "I accept it too," she said, her voice steady despite the powerful emotion coursing through her. "Completely." Kane crossed the short distance between them, and Elena found herself stepping forward to meet him, the warmth of the bond intensifying as they closed the physical distance separating them. When he finally reached out to take her hand, the connection between them solidified fully, settling into place with a certainty that felt entirely different from the fragile, broken thread she had briefly experienced with Damien over a year earlier. "This is real," she whispered, more to herself than to him, still absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "This is real," Kane echoed softly, his forehead resting gently against hers. Word of the confirmed mate bond spread quickly throughout the Iron Fang community over the following days, met with genuine joy and celebration from wolves, who had witnessed firsthand the dedication and partnership that Elena and Kane had demonstrated throughout their months of shared leadership. Griffin, in particular, expressed satisfaction that seemed to carry deeper personal significance, perhaps reflecting his own experiences with pack politics and the rarity of genuine, mutual bonds forming between true equals. "This calls for proper recognition," he suggested, during a gathering of the pack's senior members, several days after the bond's revelation. "A formal ceremony, one that honors both the ancient traditions our kind carries and the unique circumstances that brought our pack into existence." Elena and Kane agreed readily, understanding the significance such a ceremony would hold not just for their personal bond, but for the entire community they had built together. Unlike the grand, public spectacle that had marked Elena's devastating rejection over a year earlier, this ceremony would be intimate, witnessed only by the members of Iron Fang who had shared in the struggles and triumphs that had brought their pack into being. The ceremony took place on a clear evening beneath the ancient forest canopy that had sheltered their growing community from its earliest, most vulnerable days. Elena wore a simple dress crafted by Dara, who had discovered an unexpected talent for sewing during her time with the pack, far removed from the elaborate gown she had worn during her rejection, but carrying far greater personal significance, given the genuine love and community surrounding her now. As Kane spoke the traditional words marking their bond, formally claiming her as his Luna before their gathered pack, Elena felt none of the anxious uncertainty that had plagued her during the earlier ceremony, that had ended in such devastating heartbreak. Instead, she felt only steady, unwavering confidence, surrounded by wolves who had chosen her, who valued her not for her position or her bloodline alone, but for the genuine strength and compassion she had demonstrated throughout their shared journey together. When Kane finished speaking, sealing their bond formally before their assembled community, cheers erupted from the gathered pack members, genuine celebration replacing the mocking whispers and pitying glances that had accompanied her earlier, devastating rejection. Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes once more, but these tears carried only joy, relief, and profound gratitude for the unexpected path that had led her to this moment. As their pack celebrated late into the night, sharing food and stories around bonfires scattered throughout their forest settlement, Elena found a quiet moment alone with Kane, standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching their community continue celebrating together. "A year ago," she said softly, "I stood in a similar gathering, though the outcome could not have been more different." Kane wrapped his arm gently around her shoulders, pulling her close against his side. "That painful beginning led you here," he said, "to genuine belonging, to a pack that chose you completely, to a bond built on real partnership rather than mere fate alone." Elena leaned into his embrace, watching the celebration continuing around them, feeling profound gratitude for the unexpected journey that had transformed her devastating rejection into the foundation for something far more meaningful than anything she had imagined possible during those darkest early days, following Damien's public humiliation. Whatever challenges awaited Iron Fang in the future, she faced them now, not as a rejected, broken wolf desperately searching for purpose, but as a confident Luna, standing beside a mate who had chosen her completely, surrounded by a pack that had become her true family in every sense that mattered. 3 years passed swiftly, following the formal recognition of Elena and Kane's mate bond, years marked by steady, remarkable growth for the pack they had built together, from nothing more than shared hardship and determined resilience. What had begun as a small gathering of exiles seeking refuge within an ancient forest had transformed into one of the most respected and formidable packs across the known territories, its reputation for both strength and fairness spreading far beyond the wildlands where their community had first taken root. Elena stood at the entrance of Iron Fang's main hall, a structure that had grown considerably from the modest wooden buildings that once comprised their entire settlement, now replaced by an impressive stone fortress reflecting both practical defensive necessity and the pack's growing prosperity. She watched as trade caravans arrived regularly now, carrying goods and resources exchanged with neighboring territories who had come to value Iron Fang's reliability and strength as both trading partner and potential ally. Their pack numbered well over 200 wolves now, drawn from countless different backgrounds and previous circumstances, unified under principles that Elena and Kane had carefully established together, values emphasizing genuine strength, built through discipline and mutual support, rather than rigid hierarchy or arbitrary tradition. Wolves who had once been rejected, exiled, or dismissed by other packs, found not just refuge within Iron Fang's growing territory, but genuine opportunity to develop their skills and contribute meaningfully to their new community. "Elena," Kane called from across the courtyard, approaching with Griffin at his side, both wearing expressions that suggested important matters requiring her attention. "We have received formal word from the Northern Alliance. They wish to establish official diplomatic recognition, acknowledging Iron Fang as a legitimate power among the established territories." Elena felt genuine satisfaction at this news, understanding its significance clearly. The Northern Alliance represented one of the oldest and most respected coalitions among established pack territories, and their formal recognition would carry considerable weight throughout the broader network of pack politics and diplomacy. "This is excellent news," she said, though her mind was already considering the practical implications and responsibilities such recognition would bring. "What conditions accompany this recognition?" Griffin stepped forward with the diplomatic correspondence, his experienced eye having already reviewed the details carefully. "Standard territorial acknowledgement," he explained, along with an invitation to send representatives to their upcoming regional summit, where major pacts gather to discuss matters affecting broader territorial stability and cooperation. Elena nodded thoughtfully, recognizing this invitation as another significant milestone in their pact's remarkable journey, from humble, uncertain beginnings toward genuine standing among the world's established powers. "We should accept," she said, "both the recognition and the invitation to attend their summit." As Iron Fang's reputation and influence continued expanding throughout that year, Elena found herself increasingly called upon to represent their pack during diplomatic negotiations and formal gatherings with other territorial leaders. Her natural gift for commanding presence, combined with her genuine empathy and understanding, developed through years of leading wolves who had experienced their own rejections and hardships, made her remarkably effective during these delicate diplomatic engagements. Other pack leaders, initially skeptical or dismissive of a pack built from outcasts and exiles, gradually came to respect both Elena's leadership and Iron Fang's genuine capabilities, particularly after witnessing firsthand the discipline and strength demonstrated by their warriors during joint training exercises organized between allied territories. During one such gathering, hosted by a moderately sized pack territory bordering Iron Fang's eastern lands, Elena found herself engaged in conversation with several other Lunas from established packs, discussing matters ranging from resource-sharing agreements to coordinated defense strategies against increasingly organized rogue threats that had begun troubling multiple territories throughout the region. "Your pack's growth has been remarkable," observed Lunavera, representing one of the older, more traditionally established territories in the region. "Many of us initially doubted a pack built primarily from exiles and outcasts could achieve genuine stability, let alone the prosperity Iron Fang now demonstrates." Elena accepted the observation gracefully, understanding it carried genuine curiosity rather than the dismissive skepticism that had characterized many earlier interactions during Iron Fang's initial establishment. "Our strength comes precisely from that diversity of background and experience," she explained. "Wolves who have faced rejection or hardship often develop resilience and determination that traditional pack structures sometimes fail to cultivate. We simply provided the opportunity for that inherent strength to find proper direction and purpose." Lunavera nodded thoughtfully, clearly considering Elena's perspective seriously. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach that established packs like my own would benefit from considering more carefully," she admitted. As their pack's standing continued growing throughout the following months, Elena also found herself increasingly recognized for her personal capabilities, beyond simply her role as Iron Fang's Luna. Stories of her commanding presence, first demonstrated during the desperate battle that had helped preserve their fledgling community from destruction years earlier, had spread throughout pack territories, growing somewhat exaggerated with each retelling, but retaining enough truth to establish her personal reputation as a formidable force among the world's most powerful wolves. This growing recognition brought both opportunities and challenges. Established alphas sought her counsel during difficult negotiations, valuing her unique perspective and demonstrated ability to resolve conflicts through diplomatic strength rather than unnecessary violence. But her rising prominence also inevitably attracted attention from territories and leaders who viewed Iron Fang's rapid growth with concern rather than admiration, wary of a pack whose influence continued expanding so rapidly among the established order of territorial power. Kane, ever attentive to these shifting dynamics, discussed these concerns openly with Elena as they reviewed their pack's continued expansion plans one evening within their private quarters. "Not everyone celebrates our success," he observed carefully. "Some established powers view our growth as a threat to the existing balance among territories." Elena considered his words seriously, understanding the political complexity their pack's remarkable rise had introduced into broader territorial dynamics. "We built Iron Fang on principles of fairness and genuine strength," she said firmly. "We have never sought conflict with established territories, only the opportunity to provide belonging for wolves who found none elsewhere. If others perceive threat in that simple mission, The concern reflects more on their own insecurities than any genuine danger we pose. Kane nodded, though his expression remained thoughtfully cautious. Perhaps, he agreed, but we should remain prepared regardless. Political tensions have a way of eventually manifesting into more direct confrontation, particularly when established powers feel their traditional dominance genuinely threatened. Elena took his caution seriously, understanding from her own painful past experience how quickly circumstances could shift dramatically, how public perception and political maneuvering could transform seemingly stable situations into sudden crisis. As Iron Fang continued strengthening both its military capabilities and diplomatic relationships throughout the following months, preparing carefully for whatever challenges might eventually arise from their remarkable, unprecedented rise among the world's established Pact territories, word began reaching them of growing instability within one particular established power, a territory whose troubles would eventually intersect with Elena's own remarkable journey in ways she could not yet fully anticipate. The Blackthorn Pact, once considered among the most secure and dominant territories throughout the known world, was beginning to show troubling signs of internal weakness, cracks forming within a foundation that had once seemed utterly unshakable. The reports reaching Iron Fang about Blackthorn's internal troubles grew more detailed and concerning throughout the following weeks, carried by traveling merchants and diplomatic contacts who maintained relationships across multiple Pact territories. Elena listened carefully to each new account, unable to entirely suppress the complicated mixture of emotions these reports stirred within her. Curiosity mixed with something that was not quite satisfaction but also not entirely free of it. According to the most reliable accounts, Damien Cross's decision to reject his fated mate in favor of pursuing a relationship with a human woman had created lasting instability within Blackthorn's leadership structure. Instability that had only worsened as years passed without resolution. Many within the Pact's traditional power structure viewed Claire's continued presence as a fundamental weakness in their Alpha King's leadership, a human unable to fully understand or participate in the complex political and territorial responsibilities that came with ruling one of the world's most powerful Pact territories. Whispers spoke of growing tension between Damien and several senior Pact members who had once been among his most loyal supporters. Disagreements arising over decisions that many felt reflected poor judgment, increasingly influenced by his desire to protect and accommodate Claire rather than prioritize the Pact's broader interests and traditions. Elena found herself reflecting on these reports with genuine surprise at her own reaction. She had expected, if news of Damien's troubles ever reached her, that she might feel some measure of vindictive satisfaction, a sense that he was finally facing consequences for the devastating rejection that had once shattered her world so completely. Instead, she found herself feeling something closer to distant, almost detached curiosity, the pain and humiliation of that terrible night having faded considerably beneath the weight of everything she had built and achieved in the years since. "You seem thoughtful," Kane observed one evening as they reviewed the latest reports together within their private study. Elena considered his observation carefully before responding. "I expected to feel something different," she admitted. "Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. Instead, I find myself simply curious how such circumstances will resolve, without much personal investment either way." Kane's expression softened with understanding. "That reflects genuine healing," he said. "The wounds from that rejection no longer define you, Elena. You have built something far more meaningful than anything that painful night once threatened to destroy." Elena nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. Her life now centered around Iron Fang, around the genuine partnership and love she shared with Kane, around the responsibility and purpose she felt toward the growing community they had built together, from nothing more than shared hardship and determined resilience. Damien Cross and his troubles felt increasingly like distant echoes from a previous life, one that belonged to a different version of herself entirely. However, as months passed and Blackthorn's internal difficulties continued mounting, the political consequences began extending beyond the Pact's internal affairs, affecting broader territorial dynamics in ways that eventually required Iron Fang's direct attention and involvement. Several smaller territories previously allied with Blackthorn began seeking new alliances, wary of continuing association with a Pact whose leadership stability appeared increasingly uncertain. Iron Fang, having spent years carefully building its own diplomatic reputation and demonstrated stability, found itself increasingly approached by these territories, seeking new alliance partnerships, a development that Elena and Kane discussed carefully, weighing both the opportunities and potential complications such expanding influence might introduce. This positions us in an increasingly delicate situation, Griffin observed during one strategic planning session, his experienced perspective proving invaluable as always. Accepting these alliance requests would significantly expand our territorial influence and resources, but it would also inevitably position Iron Fang in more direct competition with Blackthorn's remaining influence, potentially escalating tensions that have thus far remained largely peaceful. Elena considered this carefully, understanding the complex political calculations involved. We should proceed thoughtfully, she decided, but we should not refuse legitimate alliance requests simply out of excessive caution regarding another pact's internal difficulties. If territories genuinely seek stronger partnership with Iron Fang, based on our demonstrated capabilities and values, we should welcome that opportunity, while remaining mindful of maintaining respectful, professional relationships, even with territories experiencing their own internal challenges. Kane nodded in agreement. A measured approach, he said. We expand our influence naturally, through genuine merit and demonstrated reliability, rather than through aggressive exploitation of another pact's misfortune. This careful, principled approach to their pact's continued expansion eventually brought Iron Fang's growing influence to a scale that made formal interaction with Blackthorn's leadership increasingly inevitable. The regional summit that Elena had first attended years earlier as a relatively minor territorial representative had grown considerably in significance for Iron Fang's diplomatic standing, and this year's gathering would include representatives from every major territory throughout the region, including Blackthorn itself. As preparations began for their delegation's attendance at this significant summit, Elena found herself considering, for the first time in years, the genuine possibility of encountering Damien Cross directly, face to face, for the first time since that devastating night that had originally set her unexpected journey into motion. "Are you prepared for this?" Kane asked gently as they finalized preparations for their journey to the summit location. Elena considered the question seriously, taking stock of her own genuine emotional state rather than simply offering automatic reassurance. "I believe I am," she said finally. "Whatever happened between us belongs to a different chapter of my life entirely. I am no longer the wolf he rejected that night. I am Luna of Iron Fang, bonded to a mate who chose me completely, leading a pack built on genuine strength and purpose. Whatever Damien Cross faces now within his own territory, it no longer holds power over who I have become." Kane studied her expression carefully, apparently satisfied with the genuine confidence and steadiness he found there. "Then let us proceed to this summit, prepared to represent Iron Fang's interests fully," he said, "and to demonstrate clearly just how far we have come from those difficult early days." As their delegation departed for the summit several days later, Elena felt a complicated mixture of anticipation and steady confidence, understanding that whatever encounter with Damien Cross might unfold during the gathering ahead, she would face it not as the humiliated, rejected wolf who had once fled his territory in shame and heartbreak, but as an equal, a respected Luna leading one of the region's most formidable and rapidly growing pack territories. The road ahead would bring her face to face with her past, but she walked it now, with the strength, purpose, and genuine belonging that her painful rejection had ultimately, unexpectedly, helped her discover. The regional summit took place within a grand hall constructed specifically for such gatherings, neutral territory maintained jointly by all participating packs, to ensure fair and balanced diplomatic proceedings. Elena arrived alongside Kane and Griffin, their delegation representing Iron Fang's interests among dozens of other territorial representatives, gathered from across the broader region. The hall buzzed with quiet conversation as various pack leaders and their representatives arrived, exchanging formal greetings and beginning the complex social dance that characterized these important diplomatic gatherings. Elena moved through the crowd with practiced confidence, greeting familiar allies and engaging thoughtfully with representatives from territories she had not yet formally met, her reputation clearly preceding her based on the respectful, sometimes visibly curious reactions she received throughout the hall. She spotted Damien Cross across the crowded room before their eyes actually met, recognizing his familiar bearing despite the years that had passed since their last encounter. He appeared visibly older than she remembered, lines of stress and exhaustion evident around his eyes that had not been present during that devastating ceremony years earlier. Beside him stood Claire. Though the human woman's expression carried none of the subtle satisfaction Elena remembered from that painful night, replaced instead by visible discomfort and uncertainty, as she navigated a diplomatic gathering clearly outside her natural understanding and experience. When Damien's gaze finally found Elena across the crowded hall, his expression shifted through visible surprise, recognition, and something that looked remarkably like genuine shock as he took in her transformed appearance and obvious standing among the assembled leadership. He said something quietly to Claire before making his way carefully through the crowd toward Elena's position. "Elena," he said as he approached, his voice carrying none of the cold authority she remembered from their previous encounter. "I had heard rumors that Iron Fang's Luna carried a familiar name, but I confess I did not fully believe the connection until seeing you directly." Elena met his gaze steadily, feeling remarkably calm despite the significant weight this moment carried given their shared history. "Alpha Cross," she said formally, her tone polite but carrying none of the emotional vulnerability that had once characterized their previous encounter. Damien studied her for a long moment, clearly processing the dramatic transformation from the heartbroken young wolf he remembered rejecting years earlier to the confident, powerful Luna standing before him now. "You have built something remarkable," he acknowledged, his voice carrying genuine, if somewhat uncomfortable, respect. "I have," Elena agreed simply, offering no further elaboration or emotional reaction that might satisfy whatever complex feelings had prompted this direct approach. An awkward silence stretched between them briefly before Damien spoke again, his voice quieter now, carrying something that sounded almost like genuine regret. "I have often wondered, over these past years, whether my decision that night was truly wise," he admitted. "Blackthorn has faced considerable difficulty since, difficulties I sometimes wonder if a different choice might have avoided entirely." Elena considered his words carefully, recognizing the complicated mixture of pride, regret, and perhaps genuine self-reflection underlying this admission. She thought about offering some diplomatic reassurance, some polite deflection that might ease the visible discomfort evident in his expression. Instead, she chose honesty, understanding that genuine closure required authentic acknowledgement rather than comfortable pretense. "That rejection caused me significant pain," she said honestly, her voice steady despite addressing such a painful memory directly. "But it also ultimately led me toward discovering strength and purpose I might never have found otherwise. I cannot regret the path that brought me to where I stand today, surrounded by a pack and a mate who chose me completely, without hesitation or public humiliation." Damien's expression shifted at her words, something like genuine understanding settling into his features. "That is a remarkably gracious perspective," he said quietly, given the circumstances. "It is simply the truth," Elena replied. "I hold no lingering resentment toward you, Alpha Cross. Whatever pain that night caused, I have moved beyond it entirely, built something meaningful from its aftermath. I hope, genuinely, that you and your pack find your own path toward stability and peace, whatever form that ultimately takes." As their conversation concluded, Damien returning to Claire's side with an expression that suggested considerable private reflection, Kane approached Elena from where he had observed the exchange from a respectful distance, understanding the personal significance this direct confrontation carried for his mate. "You handled that with remarkable grace," he observed quietly. Elena felt a genuine sense of peace settling within her chest, recognizing that this encounter, one she had privately wondered about, and perhaps even dreaded in the years since her rejection, had ultimately proven far less significant than she had once imagined it might feel. "That chapter of my life closed long ago," she said. "Today simply confirmed it, completely and finally." Later that same evening, as the summit's formal proceedings concluded with various diplomatic agreements and alliance confirmations completed among the gathered territories, Iron Fang's status as one of the region's most powerful and respected pack territories received formal, unanimous acknowledgement from the assembled leadership, an achievement that represented the remarkable culmination of everything Elena and Kane had built together since those uncertain early days within the ancient forest years earlier. Standing beside Kane as their formal recognition was announced before the assembled representatives, Elena felt profound gratitude for the unexpected, transformative journey that had carried her from devastating public rejection toward this moment of genuine triumph and belonging. She thought briefly of her family, of her father's careful protection during those first difficult days following her rejection, of her mother's tearful goodbye, and made a mental note to send word, soon inviting them to visit Iron Fang's now impressive territory, sharing with them fully the remarkable life she had built from circumstances that had once seemed utterly devastating. As celebrations continued throughout the hall that evening, marking both the summit's successful conclusion and Iron Fang's formal recognition among the region's most powerful territories, Elena found herself standing quietly beside Kane, near one of the hall's grand windows, watching the celebration continue around them, while reflecting on the remarkable distance she had traveled since that painful night years earlier. No longer the humiliated girl cast aside in front of hundreds of witnessing wolves, Elena stood now as Luna, of the most powerful and respected pack among the entire region, bonded completely to a mate who had chosen her without hesitation, surrounded by a community built entirely from shared resilience against rejection and hardship. Whatever pain that devastating rejection had once caused, it had ultimately led her toward a life filled with genuine purpose, belonging, and love, far exceeding anything she might have imagined possible during those darkest early days of her difficult, transformative journey. Kane took her hand gently, drawing her attention away from her reflective thoughts back toward the present celebration surrounding them. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it together, exactly as we have faced everything since that first night I found you fighting rogues within my forest." Elena smiled, genuine warmth and contentment filling her heart completely, as she looked out at the community and life they had built together, from nothing more than shared strength and determined resilience. "Together," she agreed, her voice carrying quiet, unwavering confidence. Whatever challenges or opportunities awaited Iron Fang and its Luna in the years ahead, Elena faced them now not as someone broken by her past, but as someone who had transformed devastating rejection into the foundation for a life filled with genuine strength, purpose, and belonging, standing proudly beside a mate and a pack that had chosen her completely, exactly as she truly was.